In this Fixed Gear Q&A, we'll talk about the future of fixed gear riding, fixed gear crits and trends going forward, and we'll also do some bike doctoring, clicks and creaks on the bike and knee pain, as well as some of my recommendations for how I would upgrade a beginner fixed gear bike, plus more coming up. What's up? I'm Zach Gallardo. Life is short, but don't make it shorter. Be sure to ride your bike every day to be reasonably dangerous, and consider subscribing and hitting the like button so YouTube can know to recommend you more fixed gear videos just like this one. And thanks to Wabi Cycles for being the channel sponsor and helping to make these fixed gear videos happen. A few months ago, Wabi sent over a Wabi Thunder for me to build up, and has a lot of features that are great for making the ultimate fixed gear commuter bike. And I had a ton of fun making that video, one of my favorites that I've made to date. If you want to see that, feel free to click the icon in the top left corner. Are fixed gear crits dead? I don't follow fixed gear crits, so your guess is as good as mine. But if fixed gear crits are on the decline, I can see why. Personally, I've never been interested in them. They've just never given me a reason to care about them. Why should I care about watching strangers ride around on a closed course? I get the most satisfaction from riding my bike and not necessarily watching other people ride their bikes, and I kind of find that boring. And with fixed gear crits, compared to other competitive sports, there's just no reason for a spectator to care unless you care about the actual spectating. That makes sense. Let me explain. With sports, sure, it's fun to watch the best of the best compete in basketball or football or whatever sport you have. But the thing that really makes people care about sports is the stories, the players, and the teams. People get invested into these groups of people because of what they represent. They represent the cities or the countries that they play for. They represent the hours and dedication of hard work that it takes to be the best in the world at something. And I don't really get that sense when it comes to professional cycling, fixed gear criterium racing included. I don't know who these racers are. I don't know where they come from. I don't know what their stories are. I don't know what they're hoping to accomplish by winning the race. And because of that, it's hard for me as a spectator to get invested in fixed gear criterium racing. The stories and the stakes that get people involved in other sports just aren't there, or at least they're not being told when it comes to fixed gear crits. I honestly don't care that team sponsored by aluminum bike frame manufacturer A beat out team from aluminum bike manufacturer B. At this point in time, it feels like crits are just a platform for companies to advertise, which is a fine thing for sporting events, but when I've read about crits or seen photos of crits, that seems like that's all there is to it. It seems like crits have become too pro for their own good and lost touch with the reason people ride fixed gear in the first place. Even if they are on the decline, it kind of sucks for fixed gear riding, but that's no skin off my nose. Are you going to visit the Philippines this year? This year, I am looking into getting a visa for the Philippines so that I can stay there for at least 3 months and ride with all of you. I know there's a lot of you. I don't exactly know how many of you there are, and just from my experience with the Philippines, I'm sure it will be the most memorable part of my trip. So hopefully, November, December, January 2020 to 2021, I'll be in the Philippines. What do you think is the next fixed gear trend regarding clothing or components? Track lacrosse bikes will become more popular. People are figuring out that it's a lot of fun to be able to ride anywhere you want, and it's a lot of fun to ride where there's not a whole lot of traffic. Under the track lacrosse trend, I think we'll see more track lacrosse frame sets. We haven't seen very many aluminum track lacrosse frame sets, so that is an area where there is a potential market. Wide bars are increasingly becoming the standard width for risers, and I think that will translate to other handlebar types. I'm currently riding 48 centimeter Nitto Noodles, and I actually wish that they were wider. As for clothing, there's this brand called Reasonably Dangerous, and they do limited run shirts. And word on the street is that they'll be making some new merch this year. Be sure to check that out this spring. What do you think about off-road cycling? Have you ever tried? Will you ever try it? Any gear recommendations, tires, frames, etc.? This is my previous bike. Yes, I have tried it. For me, big tires on my fixed gear made a lot of sense in theory, but in practice, I had enough issues with it that made me go back to a regular bike. While it is a ton of fun and really freeing to be able to ride anywhere you want and to take these hidden trails and paths, my problem was I didn't find them too often, and I ended up just riding my bike on the road 99.5% of the time anyway. And the problem I had with my previous bike is that it was just straight up cyclocross geometry. The front end wasn't aggressive enough for taking sharp turns on the street, which I needed way more than having stability on the off-road. For frames, there's the All-City Nature Boy, my previous bike. I had good experiences with that. And then there's the Wabi Thunder. It's a bit more aggressive and it has nicer tubing. And then there's the Surly Steamroller and the Kilo WT, which is pretty much a direct copy of the Surly Steamroller. And if you're a hype beast hipster, there's of course the Mash Steel, whatever they're calling it now. I'm half joking with that one. What are your thoughts on Tonelli and Campagnolo and Miche? Have Italian components gone out of style? For the most part, Italian components are still great. These days though, Tonellis are made in Taiwan, so it's up for debate whether they're actually Italian components. As far as Campagnolo, people really like the vintage hubs. The newer Campy stuff, people tend to not like. For instance, the Campy record pista cranks are generally thought to be pretty expensive for what you get, and they don't feel nearly as good as Sugino 75s or SRAM Omniums or one of the many other excellent 144 BCD cranks. As for Miche, I really like Miche's stuff. I've ridden the Miche pistered wheels. They are the most aggressive cornering wheels that I've ridden, which made them a ton of fun. Like seriously, in the corners, I'll be doing the Michael Jackson lean with my bike. And I've also ridden the Miche Advanced cranks. They ride just as well as the other high-end 144 BCD track cranks. The problem with them though is that the lettering is very unsightly. I wouldn't say that Italian components have gone out of style necessarily. There's just a lot of really good options right now. But if we're talking about vintage Italian components, well, nothing even really comes close for collectors when it comes to the history and the craftsmanship of that stuff. My new Fixie makes intermittent clicking sounds from around the pedals or back wheel when I pedal hard. I tighten the bolts, not sure where it's coming from the spokes. Any ideas would be greatly appreciated. The thing with noises on the bike, it's nearly impossible to diagnose it without seeing the bike in person, so my best advice would be to take it to a bike shop. That's because the noise can be coming from a number of different sources. Pretty much any contact point is fair game for the noise to be coming from. The saddle and seat post, the pedals, the handlebars. It could be making a noise when you pedal hard because of a shift in weight. It could also be coming from the bottom bracket. Entry-level fixed gears tend to skimp out on the bottom bracket, and oftentimes they usually need to be re-greased and reinstalled out of the box. I don't know what this noise sounds like. Maybe it could be coming from the spokes. Maybe you have loose spokes, or maybe there's a problem with your rear hub and the bearings. I don't know what this sounds like. Take it to a shop. Advice on crank arm length. Ride whatever's comfortable for you. On fixed gear bikes, the crank arms are usually shorter compared to geared bikes because there needs to be clearance because the cranks are always spinning so you don't clip in the corners. On bigger fixed gears, around 57 centimeters and up, bike companies usually spec them with 170mm crank arms, and for the medium and smaller sizes are usually equipped with 165mm. Now the question is that small of a difference worth paying attention to? The short answer is no, it's very negligible. In theory, with a shorter crank, you can spin faster, and in theory, with a longer crank, you have more leverage, but it takes a greater distance, so you can mash better. 5 to 7mm is nothing to sweat over unless it's causing you pain. Which brings us to our next question. I'm 44 years old and I ride a fixed gear, and lately my right knee began to hurt along the ride that I can no longer backpedal. My question is, how can I minimize, even eliminate knee pain? Is it about my age? Should I put on brakes? Any thoughts? Knee pain on your bike can come from 4 places: the gearing, the saddle height, your cleats if you're riding clipless, and your crank length. Improper gearing is the most common problem for knee pain on fixed gears. If the gear is too high, you're putting too much strain on your knees. This is really apparent when you're climbing hills and you're really chugging slowly. Second is saddle height. If your saddle is too high, you could be hyperextending your knee, and over time that could cause pain. And if you're riding clipless, your feet will be locked in according to how you position your cleats. And everybody has a different foot position that is most comfortable for them when riding a bike. So if you're riding clipless and your cleats are locking your feet into a position that's unnatural for you, that could cause knee pain as well. And lastly, if your cranks are too long, that could cause you to hyperextend your leg and knee pain. Good idea not backpedaling and relying on a brake. Secondly, try lowering your gearing and lowering your saddle height. And if you're riding clipless, try riding with platforms or toe clips and straps, whatever you fancy, to see if the knee pain goes away. I have a State 4130 and I want to start upgrading. If a 4130 were your daily rider, what all would you replace and what specific components would you use? The answer to that always depends on budget. If budget were not a question, then I wouldn't be riding a 4130 as a daily. I'd be riding my bike. I've ridden the State 4130 and it's honestly a pretty solid bike, and unless it was causing me a severe amount of discomfort, I wouldn't replace it. The first things that I look to upgrade on a bike are always the contact points, the handlebars, the saddle, and the pedals. These things make the biggest difference to me when I'm riding a bike. If I'm not comfortable, I'm not going to enjoy it. I just swap out the contact points for the stuff that I'm riding on my bike. Feel free to check out these components linked in the description. Handlebars, 48 centimeter Nitto Noodles with TRP RRL levers. Saddle, Brooks Swift. I could also go for a Brooks Cambium, those are sweet too. And the pedals are MKS Sylvans with stainless steel MKS toe clips and MKS Spirit Alpha double straps. Other than that, I'd probably just swap the tires out for gator skins once they were worn down or if I'm getting too many flats. I found the cranks to be fine. They're not stiffest in the world, but they're perfectly usable. I found the wheels to be fine. They're sealed bearings, so they'll run smoothly. They're not the lightest in the world, but they're perfectly usable. It's a solid bike. If you don't know what to upgrade, you probably don't need to upgrade. But if you just want to upgrade because that makes you happy and you think that'll encourage you to ride your bike more, then those are my choices. If you want to have your question answered in the next Fixed Gear Q&A, keep an eye out for the YouTube post towards the end of each month where you can ask your question. And since we talked a lot about fixed gear trends and track-low cross and riding off-road, feel free to check out the build-up and ride of the Wabi Thunder by clicking the card above. I had a ton of fun making this video and it is one of my favorite videos that I've made to date. And also the bike is really sweet and I kind of want it, which is a little bittersweet for me. If I wasn't traveling, I think I would have a Thunder as an N+1. And Fixie famous shoutouts to Stan Strong 108s and Ryan Witt for the support on Patreon, also helping to make these fixed gear videos possible. And stop watching me right now if you haven't ridden your bike yet today, because life is short, but don't make it shorter, so be sure to ride your bike every day to be reasonably dangerous.